Hey, everybody. Keith here, live in the lab. Live in the Business Athlete Performance Lab, bringing it in with some Theory of a Dead Man. Good Canadian band, Medusa. If you guys like Theory, I would encourage you to give them a listen. Very much rock and roll. You can see how they've introduced some new sounds to their music, and a big fan. So check them out, Theory of a Dead Man. But what you got to check out is what's coming up here in a couple of minutes. Really excited about our guest, Kevin Maney. He's an author and specializing in technology and business topics. Let me tell you, I quickly said hi to Kevin before he jumped into the room today, and behind him is a bunch of guitars. And Kevin's in a band. And we all know who listen to the show, and you all know who know me. I love tunes, love music. We're bringing it into the show. So I suspect we're going to have a conversation in the Business Athlete Performance Lab here with Kevin about music as well. So stay tuned for that, and we're just going to have an honest chat. He has authored books like Intended Consequences, Unhealthcare, Unscaled, Unhealth, Play Bigger. He's co-authored books. He's been all over the media, and I think we're going to have a great chat. So why doesn't Keith stop talking, and why don't we bring in our guest, Kevin Maney. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Hey, Keith. Glad to be here.
Awesome.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah, I think that's the point. Right? Like I said to you when we quickly kind of had the pre-chat, and my comment was, the world right now is all about trying to grab somebody's attention and earballs, and hopefully somebody hearing my voice is, okay, what's he going to say next? Because we want to keep them listening to us, right? So, you kind of speak with a hook, you kind of leave hooks, and I've listened to enough talk radio and talk shows in my lifetime where you think, okay, they say that to get the listener to last that much longer. So Kevin, Roland says, hey, Keith, you got to talk to Kevin. I'm like, oh, yeah? He goes, yeah, check out his resume. So I pull up the resume in LinkedIn. You can find Kevin in LinkedIn, and it's endless. You've written tons of books. You've been all over the media. Where do we start? I know where we'll start. How will we start here? So we're in the Business Athlete Performance Lab. We're big proponents of weaving wellness and fitness and all those, emotion, all those attributes that make us better in business. You're clearly successful in business, a successful musician. What do you do? Jump into it. What do you do to keep yourself, your human, on top track, Kev?
I play soccer.
So it's interesting. 2 days ago, I had a baseball guy. So, because I'm thinking when I got into this, we're talking to marathoners and runners and people who ride bikes and lifters, like just kind of the stuff, I'll say this, that old people do, walk around the block, right? You play soccer.
Yeah, no, I grew up in Binghamton, New York.
Yeah.
Upstate New York town, in a neighborhood that was largely populated by first or second generation Eastern Europeans. And so, while other communities were out there playing, baseball and football, mine was, all about soccer. So I grew up with it and played it all my life. And I'm these days, I'm always like the oldest guy in the pitch.
I love it.
20 years.
Yeah.
And I can still keep up with those 20-year-olds.
I love it. I found when I started this show and started talking to people that, that are in business, that they secretly have these sports hobbies that we do. And like I said, baseball, and you play soccer. So do you call it soccer? Are you calling it soccer just for my respect and our listeners' respect, or because growing up with all your friends, it was football, wasn't it?
Well, yeah. And in fact, so I live in New York.
Yes.
And, and one of the things I love about playing here is that you go out on a pitch and, you're with people from 30 different countries, and so, I've made friends from all over the world doing this, and you get, of course, they're all calling it football or something like that.
Yes.
But it's just, it's one of those things that, one of the things that I think is really, really important in life is to find things to do that make you forget about everything else.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I have two things that I do that are that. One is play soccer and one is play music.
Love it.
So if I'm on stage playing in front of a group of people, there's nothing else I can think about except for what I'm playing at that moment, right?
Yeah.
Or if I'm out on a soccer field playing, there's absolutely nothing else I can think about except playing. Because if I think about something else, somebody's going to like wipe me out, right?
Yes.
Basically,
Yes.
if I lose my concentration. So I love having that in my life. And in fact, if either one of those things were taken away from me, for some reason, I'd have to find something else that is like that.
That's fantastic. How often do you play soccer? Like how often are you on the pitch?
I try it for 20, usually twice a week, unless I'm traveling or something
Yeah.
interrupts it. And so try for twice a week doing that, and rehearse with the band, usually, every Tuesday night. And we play around, maybe half a dozen times through the year. And all that, kind of keeps me much fresher for actually having to think about things later.
I love it. So we're gonna get to the band in a few moments. Trust me, because when I saw that, and I haven't listened to the tunes, but I saw you were I saw you played music and so forth. I want to stay on the sports angle for a few moments here.
Yeah,
So in
sure.
my mind, I'm thinking that playing soccer, playing football in New York, are you in New York City or New York State?
New York City, yeah.
So I'm thinking in my mind, I have this magical, I'm closing my eyes right now to those that are listening on the podcast. I'm closing my eyes and I'm thinking that I'm playing soccer amongst these caverns of massive, tall buildings. And it's just this magical feeling. Am I correct?
Well, sort of.
Yeah. Yeah.
I often end up playing. It's actually kind of cool because
Come on, Kev,
I
help me
often
sell
end up
this, man.
playing
Help me
in.
sell this.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I often end up playing. Most of the time, I'm playing in Brooklyn, which is just
Okay.
across
Yeah.
the river from
Yeah.
Manhattan.
Yeah.
And most of the time, the field that I'm playing on is close to the river. So you're basically playing on this field. You're over in Brooklyn. You're not actually surrounded by the skyscrapers, but the Manhattan skyline is
That
like
is
laid out right in front
beautiful.
of
I can envision that. I've
you. And
been to Brooklyn and I've seen across the river there too. So I can imagine what that looks like. That's
it is
magical.
it's very inspiring. And so and once in a while I end up playing with a group that plays in Central Park. And then you go, every once in a while you have to stop and go, like, I'm playing soccer in Central Park in New
Yeah.
York. I mean, how cool is that, right?
It is really cool. Yeah. And good on you for not taking it for granted. Like really, right? Because it's easy to do so, right? It's easy to run down the pitch on, and look across the river there and see the Manhattan skyline and say, oh, there's New York City, right? Or be running down in Central Park. But to have that awareness, that's to me, that's magical, frankly, just to kind of pause and go, yeah, because a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people just kind of go through the moment and then wait, something just happened.
Yeah, no, don't lose that, because I've lived my adult life two cities. One has been New York, and the other's been Washington D.C. And I never lost my awe for either one of them. In fact, like even with the soccer thing, we sometimes end up playing with people that right on the ellipse across from the White House, and
Yeah.
you're standing there, you're seeing the Washington Monument and the White House, and I'm going, I'm playing a sport here, and it's just you can't lose your amazement for that kind of stuff.
I don't know about you, but when you're running down the pitch, like you're thinking like you're 20, right? Like you're 18, 20, you just, your hair is flowing. You can just see back and then you're done and you get home and you sit down on the couch or get into bed. And then you recognize that you're probably closer to a different age. I know that's how I am, right? Isn't that true? Right. Yeah.
Well, I often recognize that. Well, on the pitch,
Yeah.
my head is one age, my knees are another age. So,
Oh yeah, the knees, right? Yeah. Oh, that's the sound I have when I walk up the stairs here. Those crinking and crunching knees, right? Oh, it's not just me then, Kevin.
No, it's
not. So outside of soccer and outside of music and physically, so do you meditate? Do you do things to take care of your mental state, or is doing those activities enough for you to, like you said, keep your head clear so that when you step into the business ring, you're ready to rock and roll?
Yeah, those are my big escapes.
Yeah.
Those are my big escapes.
Well, then let's just
yeah. I mean, other people have meditation, religion, cooking, all these other different kinds of things. But those two are my big escapes.
Interesting. So I had a guest on last week, Sardar Akhmedov, runs an app development company down in Southern Florida. Great guy. And we were talking about hobbies. And his comment was, yeah, I don't have a hobby. And I said, Sardar, it took me, well, I'm 51. It took me 51 years to recognize that I don't have a hobby either. This is my hobby. Like and some would say, yeah, but you're a workaholic. Yeah, but I don't know, like talking to people or creating or building, or perhaps in your case, writing books or like, when you're doing something you love, I don't know if there's such a thing as a hobby. Is hobby an old school term, Kevin? Kind of back from our old era, do you think?
Well, it's funny you say that because actually it's true. I mean, people don't use that word
It's a side
anymore.
hustle now, right? You're going,
When you say hobby, it's you got to picture somebody like in their basement with trains, right? That's what
yes,
they do.
yes, yes.
It's like,
Yeah, yeah. It's a
but
side hustle that you monetize now, isn't it? Basically.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, I mean, look, I mean, I love that writing has been my profession, and in fact, um, the other half of writing is that because when you're a journalist or an author, you're writing nonfiction. It's also a license to learn about things, right?
Yes.
I mean, writing, being a journalist for a major publication is like a ticket to be able to ask anybody anything, at the highest levels. And so I mean, that was always a wonderful part of my job, is being able to learn about anything I wanted to learn about.
Yes.
And then the other half is that I've always from the time I was a kid enjoyed writing and putting together stories and words. It's like it's a puzzle. It's a conversation. It's a lot of things. And and if I'm really working on something that I really enjoy, I totally get in that flow state with writing. I mean, you just lose track of time. You lose track of,
Yes.
you'd be sitting on a pincushion for all you care. You're in that state. And so yeah, but the other piece of that is that I think that writing, especially writing like something that is a big project, a book, or a giant major essay or something like that, it is some of the hardest thinking you can possibly do as a person. I'm sure that mathematicians who work on like giant formulas about like, there's something like that. It's, or coders who are trying to put together a million lines of code to, create some new thing, have the same sort of feeling about it, because they are actually in some ways forms of writing. But yeah, I just, it's a terrifically hard mental exercise. So I think that's one of the reasons that it's helpful to have these other things that are completely take your brain completely away from it once in a while.
That's interesting. So I enjoy writing. I've never professionally written like you have. I'm curious when you say it's one of the hardest things. Expand upon that, because perhaps to many writing is not difficult, but when you use those words, it is one. What it's to somebody who's writing code, or a mathematician who would look at you and go, "What do you mean? It's not hard, Kevin. You're just putting words together." What do you mean when you make that statement that it could be the most difficult thing you do?
Well, uh, um, bad writing is easy and great writing is hard.
Yeah.
And the reason that it's so hard is because um, so I've collaborated collaborated with a lot of CEOs and thought leaders on what everything from op-ed pieces to full length books. And one of the things that I've just discovered about the act of writing, and that um, is something the act of writing brings to these kinds of people who don't necessarily write but are brilliant thinkers, is that writing it down requires enormous discipline of thought,
Yes.
because everything has to flow in an order, and everything has to connect to each other. So you sit down with a brilliant CEO, for instance, who's known for a lot of great ideas, but their ideas typically are like, there's this one over here and there's this one over here, um, and they may all be wonderful, but then they want them to add up to something, and and being able to connect all of those together in a way that makes sense and becomes a story, and actually forces you to, for instance, throw out things that don't fit with the story, or add new things that do. But all of that it requires to take all of that sort of random thinking and all these great ideas and all these what things you might talk about in meetings or whatever else, but actually apply a very strict discipline to all of those things, so that they actually all connect and create something that's larger than each individual piece by itself. And that's the part that is really so hard. I mean, yes, it can be a challenge to find the exact right word here, or create put the right sentence together, but that's not the real hard part. The hard part is creating that complete
The arc.
puzzle
Yes.
that all makes sense together and adds up to something bigger than each individual piece.
Fascinating. Kevin, is a good communicator a good writer?
Um, Not always. I've met people who, so one of my co-authors,
Yeah.
and of the book Play Bigger is this fellow named Christopher Lockhead, who also has a very popular podcast, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, Christopher, we'll get you
Chris
guest on the
is
show. Hey,
now
Chris.
Chris is Chris is a good writer, but he's the most one of the most brilliant off the cuff speakers that I've ever run across. I mean, you just put him on stage and give him throw him a Scooby snack or something, and
Off you go. Yeah.
He just turns into a fountain of of things that sound amazing.
Yes. Yes.
And if you asked him to write all of that before he went up there on stage, he probably couldn't do it. So there are definitely people who are these unbelievably brilliant thinkers on their feet, who are would actually struggle to write that stuff down by themselves. And by the same token, my I am I maybe you could tell from this interview, like I grew up as being able to express myself better than any other way in writing.
Mhm.
If I really need to say something to somebody and have it really all make sense and hold
Mhm.
together, I'll write it,
Mhm.
because I am not the best like off the cuff speaker. I mean, if you put me on stage without me already structuring what I was going to say, I would have a hard time.
So would you
So
say
yeah,
that
I think
you're in your
there's
uncomfort
two
zone right
different.
now?
No, I mean I'm not uncomfortable. It's just that I'm just saying, like, I know I can't be as brilliant as, for instance, Chris Lockhead
Yes.
off the cuff. Chris, I don't think, can be as brilliant as I might be able to be if I'm sitting down and writing something on paper. I really, I've seen this over and over again. There is this kind of two different sort of types of people in the world. There's two different types of great communicators. Let me put it that way. Since you started the question off with about communication.
It's interesting to hear you say that, Kevin. Kevin Maney, guest here in the Live in the Lab podcast today, with myself, Keith Bilous. We're talking about communicating and writing. If you're just jumping in, it's interesting to hear you say writing it down or speaking, because sometimes I think when we as humans, I know myself, I got to go into a big meeting with somebody, or maybe it's a personal meeting, whether it's my wife or my kids. You say, okay, I got all these things I need to say. Do I write them down? Do I like write a script for myself so I don't forget anything? Or do I just kind of make it off the cuff? And then you kind of revisit yourself going, well, no, I don't want to write it down. That's too formal. And that seems kind of weird. Then I'm going to read off this note. But in reality, what a wonderful practice if you can kind of get in the if you can get into the habit of thoroughly expressing yourself, writing it down, and then addressing the person you want to speak to, and not be afraid to do that, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and there's a phrase, there's a quote that's attributed to an old author named Daniel Boorstin.
Yes.
And I used to have it on I don't have it on my desk anymore, but I used to have it on my desk. And the quote was, "I write to find out what I think."
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, that is absolutely true for me. I mean, if I have to think something through, the best way I can think it through is to write it.
Yeah. I'm not too dissimilar. One of the one of the most brilliant apps I've downloaded on my phone, and it's such a to the creators, they're going to cringe if they hear me say it, but it's this app called Tot. It's 3 letters, TOT. And really what it is, it's essentially, it's 5 disposable, quote unquote, digital disposable pieces of paper that I just kind of go, blah, throw my thoughts on it. And then when I'm done with it, there's nothing else I can do with it. I just erase it. So, but the simplicity of it is the magic, because then I can take what's up in my head and then just dump it out.
Oh,
But
interesting. I haven't heard of that.
and here's where I'm going to take the conversation next, is in the world of generative AI. So as a writer, I'm really eager to hear your opinion and discussion around this. So AI has made me a better writer, and I'll explain that in a second. But what it's also done for me is it's become my notepad. So when you use that cliche of, for me to write, I got to think I have to write. Instead of writing my notes in a notepad anymore, I just dump my notes into a conversation with GPT, and we just kind of talk it out. But how it has made me a better writer is I've learned the better that I can communicate with it, the better it'll communicate back and give me the results. So I'm thinking that if you're ghostwriting for me, you want to say to me, Keith, clearly communicate to me how we want this to go, so that we can deliver it in the tone and voice that you want it to go. What is your opinion? What is your thoughts? How has it impacted your world? Let's talk about Chat GPT since it's been in front of you in the last 10 months.
Yeah, I'll answer that, but then I actually would like to hear more about your usage of it, about using the
Absolutely.
notes.
Yeah.
And because that's really interesting to me. I mean, it's been fascinating to me to hear over and over like what different people are doing with it.
Yes.
And because everybody's trying stuff out right now. And so for me, I have not used it to help me with writing itself. I feel like at this point in my life, I've got my process and I know what I'm doing. And I would say that, maybe for me, writing is like the equivalent of, um, somebody who is a master or tailored, clothes designer who makes everything, clothing from scratch, and you
Right.
couldn't possibly,
Right.
duplicate that in any factory, right?
Yes.
So if ChatGPT is something like a factory, for, words and thoughts, that's it can help people create nice stuff, that's very, that's very appealing, but it can't quite cross that border into like what a, handcrafted designer might be able to make, right? And so
Yes.
I think, I get to be the handcrafted designer, and so, I feel that the Chat GPT stuff doesn't help me write, but it does help me, research and understand things. Like, if I have a general question that I just want to, it's a little more complicated than just typing a couple words to search for. I'll use it just to gather some background information.
Sure.
I am, as a longtime journalist, I'm very wary about where these things come from. It doesn't
Yes.
tell me the sources usually. All of that bothers me a lot.
Yes.
Uh,
Oh man, we have
but
lots to talk about.
yeah, but as long as I'm not actually like, using it as, accepting it as truth, but using it as a prompt to help you understand something, then that's helpful.
It's
Um,
another tool, isn't it? It's another tool, and
yeah,
I've said on this show all along that so I use it for everything, admittedly, and I mean everything. Um, any meeting I go into in advance, I ask GPT. I'll say, "Hey, I'm going into a meeting with Kevin. Here's Kevin's stats. What should we talk about?" Because I say to myself, like, why wouldn't I? Right? Or if I'm going into a meeting where I know nothing about the company or organization or the industry or whatever, hey GPT, I'm going to this meeting with such and such industry. And here's what we're talking about. What should I be thinking about? What should I be asking? Right. So it gives me that pre-context, right? And then I'll go to the meeting and then I'll quickly, literally on my phone, you're asking how I use it. I just open up the GPT, I start a new conversation, and I'll say, hey, just had a quick chat with Kevin. Here's what we talked about. And I just basically dump my brain into a conversation with GPT. So and then I leave it there. And then when I'm ready to come back to it, I come back to it. Right. So but the key for me is not to keep having different conversations in the same thread, right? So I'll put Keith and Kevin's chat over on the side, and then I'll come back to it when I'm ready, and then I'll go to my next meeting. But I literally use it for every single thing I do throughout my day, and that's really what allowed me to create these things we're doing here in the lab is um seeing the power of generative AI and how you can create content and create crazy things. And as a result of it, we've been creating some really neat things in the lab. So I'm interested to hear from you as an author. What's your thought? What's your feelings on the copyright issues that many authors around the world have been kind of standing up and saying, "Hey, you trained your data set on my work. I need to be compensated for that."
yeah, no, I mean, I haven't been, an activist in that
Mm-hmm.
sense,
Mm-hmm.
but I do believe that's true, and I'm very interested in how this is going to play out because, yeah, I mean, I've written a bunch of books, I've written a whole lot of, articles and things that I own the copyright on, and if Chat GPT or any of these others are digesting that and spitting it back to people without even referencing where it came from, much less paying me for it, that's not right. And I think that's got to be sorted out, and we'll be sorted. I mean, people are already taking, court actions to try to figure this stuff out. and it's gonna be interesting.
I wonder to what extent it does get sorted out, though, Kevin. Like, I wonder if it, because I pay a lot of attention to this, and it makes me wonder whether it becomes like the new privacy, right? So if we think about the internet 15, 17 years ago, privacy was kind of like, we were just doing everything on the internet until we woke up a few years ago. Oh yeah, privacy is pretty important, right? And then just kind of become an accepted standard. So copying text off the internet and copying content off the internet to many people just becomes is it just become an accepted thing? Does it ever really get sorted out? Right.
Yeah, but here's the difference. Um, I willingly, I mean, maybe to a lot of people not knowingly, but I willingly trade my privacy for something,
Yes.
right?
So do
I
I.
give
Yes.
Google my privacy so I can use its maps. I give Google
Yes.
my privacy so or I give Facebook my privacy so I can have, connections with my friends or something like that. Yeah, I kind of know what I'm getting into. When it comes to, OpenAI or somebody else
Yes.
ingesting my work, I'm not getting anything for that. And I'm not willingly doing it. To me, that's stealing.
Right. Yep. Yep. Absolutely. There's certainly an argument to be made for that, for sure. For sure. So then, do you what do you vision the internet, or what do you envision, the internet looking like as we continue to move forward? Is it paywalled? Is it because are digital publishers saying to themselves, nah, I'm not letting my stuff for free. So to get behind it, you got to get behind the paywall. Is that the internet we're moving towards over the next couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how that's going to sort out. I mean, it did, look, but that started to happen with journalism, and people are either putting stuff behind paywalls, or you've seen this now in Europe where publishers have sued Facebook and
Mhm.
want to they have to pay for the content now, and so I mean, all this again, it's going to take time because regulations and laws and lawsuits and court cases or whatever lag far behind the
Yes.
technology that gets going.
Don't we know that?
And look, you even see, like, I mean, this is always been a theme, right? I mean, you look right now, for instance, in places like New York or other places that are finally having this big pushback against Airbnb.
Mhm.
I mean, it got way out ahead of what city governments could possibly deal with, or regulators could deal with, and then turned into a problem for cities. It was investors are buying up houses to put them on Airbnb. It's raising housing prices. It's leaving people, with no low cost housing. I mean, it's become more of a problem, and now finally cities are taking action, and it's going to be a problem for Airbnb probably at this point. So, I mean, these things are going to happen. It's just going to take time.
Yeah, it's that's certainly the case. Things are going to take time. Kevin, you mentioned a word a few moments ago that I jumped in my head at, and Roland is sending me. Producer Roland right now is texting me. He's all looks good. So we got the green light from Roland there. Thanks, Roland. Thumbs up, pal. This is good. Our 30 minutes into our chat. Kevin, you mentioned truth. And earlier this week, I launched a new product, perhaps new company, called truthbox.ai, to those that are listening. And we launched a video to publicize it, a 90-second video. I would invite you to check it out after the call. But I want to talk about truth. And I want to talk about truth and narratives in a world of fake, questionable, generative AI content. What's your view of truth in 2023?
Well, that's a hard question. I mean, that is one of the biggest problems for society right now, right? I
Isn't
mean,
it? Mm-hmm.
you know, uh,
And it's
um,
scary, Kevin.
well, there's this comedian Jordan Klepper who goes and does these he's like used to be with the Daily Show, and he does these bits on YouTube where he goes and interviews people at some of the Trump rallies, and this is not necessarily pro or negative, Trump or anything like that, but it's just like, if you watch some of those and you see the people's absolute convictions of what reality is so far off from what another group of people's absolute convictions of reality are.
Yes.
And it's not just beliefs. It's like actually convictions that that's what is really happening in the world right now. And that's what's I don't understand how we put that back together.
Well, we don't, Kevin. And then what's really, from my point of view, really scary is that there's a third layer that people aren't considering it either, and maybe even the fourth. So the first layer you mentioned is, okay, that group over there agrees with that fact, that truth. This group over here agrees with this fact and this truth, and they don't disagree with each other. But what about the other group that has been digitally made that aren't actually real, but they look real?
Right.
Because I've created that. Like I've been able to create digital humans that are saying things and believing things that I can put in front of you, and you're like, yeah, but that's not real. No, it's not real. So how do we reconcile that in a couple of years where that gets tossed into the equation as news and media and content starts coming to you, and you're going, okay, so first of all, is that true? And then is it authentically true? I think that's a question that people are thinking about but aren't ready yet for. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, and this even goes to the heart of the writers and actors strikes
It
in Hollywood at
does.
this point, right?
Yes.
Because look, whatever you can imagine that AI is going to be able to do and create, even if it's not possible now, I guarantee you it's going to be possible in 5 years or
Oh, it absolutely
maybe
is.
sooner.
Yes.
So right, so writers and actors are looking down the path and saying, well, can AI is going to be able to basically digitally create a very human looking actor saying lines that are digitally created by a very good AI that can write a script. So, it's I don't have answers for you, Keith, on this because this is all new territory for humanity, right? Like it's like how is this going to turn out? I actually don't know. I mean, I would love to be in some of these negotiating sessions with the writers and actors guilds in the Hollywood studios just to hear what the conversation is like and what people are really thinking is going to happen.
Yeah. It is a fascinating time. And experts predict, 2 years from now, 95% of the content on the internet will be generated by AI, right? So we look at maybe model collapses, we look at AI generating AI, and at the pace that it's happening is bewildering to me. And like I said, we have a major US election coming up in 13, 14 months, and it's going to be the first AI fake election or AI election ever on the planet. So what's that going to how's that going to proceed, right? So I find it a really fascinating time. You have let's talk a little bit. Let's weave music into it, right? We're hearing some of the first AI generated music. Nominating for the Grammys, and the Grammys said, no, hold on a second here. No, you can't put the Drake and Weekend song in for the Grammys. But what I found interesting, I don't know if you heard this, Kevin, but the ghostwriter that wrote that track actually put an offer out to the Weekend and Drake and said, hey, you guys can get royalties on this. Like, your voice now is an asset. Let's monetize it instead of hide from it. Right. So I thought that was interesting because now I'm saying that because you have instruments behind you have instruments behind you, have guitars behind you. So your guitar is an asset that makes sounds. Well, so is my voice. So let's monetize my voice. I find that really fascinating that point of view.
Sure, yeah. Well, the singer Grimes, the one who's just
Yes.
been with Elon Musk. I mean, she essentially proactively did this, and she put a statement out that said if anybody out there uses my voice, writes a song, uses my voice to create that song through AI, I'll split the proceeds with you 50-50 instead of suing you. And I thought it was actually a really interesting experiment.
Well, it's fascinating because it's definitely not if you recall back when Napster was out and Metallica, it was basically anti-Napster, and Lars and the gang are like, no, we can't put our music on Napster. And it was a kind of a pivotal moment in that whole digital rights music and so forth. And what's happening now is instead of swimming against the wave, let's just go with the wave, right? Here's my stuff, go and put it out, right? So
Right.
Yeah. Let,
But um, but like the one thing that I think one thing that does as a writer for 30 some plus years of about the technology industry, um, well, all of this stuff is like new and interesting and scary, and and it has big implications and all that. Uh, I think the conversation tilts a lot towards that, and not as much towards the benefits that are going to be possible because of this. And like the book you mentioned, the book on healthcare that I wrote with the CEO of General Catalyst, and that was really basically about how AI can change healthcare, and what's coming down. I mean, we live in America. We live in like the most messed up healthcare system on the planet.
Oh no, no,
Um,
I'm going to debate you. Sorry, I live in Canada.
yeah,
I think we're in the most messed up healthcare system. And I'll tell you, and I'm going to share something that I haven't shared with anybody on the show, but
sure.
um, my my mom is aging in front of me, and she's now entering the healthcare system, and it
Mhm.
is a pain in the ass, frankly. Right. So I was before our call, I was on the phone phoning into the United States saying, "Hey, can my mom come on down to get some CT scans and ultrasounds done? Because oh, how can you get? Oh yeah, we can come down next week. Great. Because you know what, Kevin, here in Canada, it's she's probably a few months away from getting that done. So sure,
Yeah,
sure, her taxes are paying for it, right? She's paid her share of taxes to pay for that, but I don't know. And listen, I don't know if there's a right healthcare system, whether it's my country or your country, but um, they're messed up. But please go on and expand
they are. Yeah,
upon your
and
calm.
my daughter lives in the UK, and the National Health Service over there is just as having the same struggles. So
What's the
yes,
answer,
they're all
Kevin?
messed up in their own unique ways. What's that?
Yes. Yeah. What's the answer? Is it what is the
Well,
answer?
the um, there's at least a promise here that that AI in different ways can have a big impact on both the cost of healthcare, the availability of healthcare.
Yes.
I mean, look, one of the things uh, that that is driving most of the problem with healthcare is because healthcare is a very scarce thing, right? There's only so many doctors, so many
Yes.
nurses, so many hospitals, and they're serving an enormous population. And in fact, as the population gets more and more unhealthy because of obesity and diabetes and all these other things, there is more and more of a population that needs chronic care. And all this is just overwhelming the system, but it's all because of scarcity.
Yes.
And one of the promises of AI in various different ways, it um, is an ability to eliminate that scarcity, right? To create abundance and certain things. So here's one quick example of a company that I encountered through the work that I'm doing with the General Catalyst CEO, because we've written a number of books together, working on another one now. Um, I ran across a company that he helped fund called Hippocratic AI,
Mhm.
and one of the beginning principles was that, okay, look, there's an enormous nursing shortage. I mean, there's something like in the U.S. alone, there's something like 200,000 nursing jobs that are positions unfilled, and even if you fill all of those, there's still a shortage of fewer nurses than there should be
Mhm.
to care for
Mhm.
the population.
Mhm.
But on the other hand, especially, I mean, everybody, but especially somebody with some kind of a chronic disease, would be far healthier and far less having to enter the healthcare system and have costly procedures done if they only had a nurse by their side 24/7, right, to help keep them healthy, to
Mhm.
give them advice, to answer their
Mhm.
questions. What
Mhm.
absolutely not possible, because of the population differences between nurses and people. But if you could take an AI and as this company is doing, and spend a year training it on what nurses know and what the advice they give, and on these different diseases, and then release that out into the world so that you and I, if we were to have to use this AI, it would also be able to learn about us individually,
Mhm.
over time through our actions or through
Hmm.
questions and
Hmm.
answers, conversations. ChatGPT can
Hmm.
basically have a conversation with you, right? It's
Hmm.
going to learn about it. So now it's got all this nursing knowledge, and now it's got all this knowledge about me. So basically, in software, this would be able to recreate the idea
Of
of a nurse
nurse.
in your pocket. They're 24/7 to help you manage whatever health condition you have. Now, it's not going to replace it's and this whole thing about jobs and everything else. I mean, there's certain worries, but like in this, for instance, case, the actual human nurses now get to do what human nurses are supposed to do, which is the hands-on stuff, right? The patient care next to you in the hospital bed, they're giving you an IV and all these kinds of things. So they get a lot of this sort of administrative and question answering stuff off of their plates, can actually do the jobs that they're trained to do. And now this AI can be with me every second of the day. If I have diabetes, say, and I need to understand how to manage it, or have somebody answer my question or tell me when there's going to be an episode I need to take care of or something like that.
Hmm.
Um, Now it's not only going to make me, it's going to make me healthier because I can take care of myself better. It's also going to keep me out of the healthcare system. So some of that gets less overwhelmed, adds to the less scarcity of the healthcare. And so if you have things like that are happening everywhere across the healthcare system now in all these different various pockets, and it's going to happen in all sorts of other sectors too. And so there is this hope that if this kind of stuff plays out, that it can alleviate this burden on the healthcare system, alleviate some of the scarcity stuff, lower the cost of healthcare for most people, make it more available for the people who really need it. And there is a chance that this technology, if deployed well, could actually do a lot to better your Canadian healthcare system, our
Yes.
American healthcare
Yeah.
system, the NHS, every place else. So, there's some real good that can come of this, aside from all of the things that people are afraid of.
Yeah, you raised some great examples of how AI can be used to help those. I know we have used it ourselves here in the lab. We earlier this year we built an AI with a bunch of coaching and healthcare knowledge and so forth, and um, trained it to do some really cool things. And then I used a few different AIs to help myself diagnose, not self-diagnose, but to go through my biomarkers. Right. So I got some recent biomarker tests done. I sat down with a couple AI and I had conversation with the AI. We got with my biomarkers, and it was spectacular, Kevin, because it wasn't because I felt heard. It sounds bizarre, but I felt heard, right? And I was able to have
Right.
a conversation. I got insightful responses, because in my experience, when I go to the doctor, it's you got to be in, you got to be out in, what, 12, 15 minutes, and it's just short
Yeah.
answers, and nobody's really digging into the questions. I was able to sit down in my living room and have a conversation with the AI about, why my TSH levels are low, like why my thyroid's out of whack, and talk about the implications of how it impacts my cholesterol. And I know many people would say, yeah, but Keith, you can use Google for that. No, but not really. Like the conversational insight and the comfort that
Yeah,
I
that's
had,
right.
right, was spectacular. And then I read a great piece in the New York Times a while back, an opinion piece, which was a doctor who said that they discovered how GPT taught them empathy. They were using it prior to going into difficult conversations with families. They found themselves, prepping the GPT to say, "Hey, I'm going into a conversation with a family where this is this is this. What's the best approach? I can sit down with Kevin and his family to deliver the news and to be empathetic." And I found that another remarkable way of teaching a human how to, use the technology to connect to another human being.
No, that's right. I remember reading that same one, and
You did, eh?
that
Yeah.
is, yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's going to be amazing how all this ends up affecting society. And like one of the things that there's a theme to some of this, to what you were just talking
Yeah.
about, for instance, and
Yeah.
um, that that I've written about quite a number of times, and it's that for maybe 70 years of data technology being created, software, computers, and all that. Um, what was essentially happening, it was that we had, because computers were essentially so dumb,
Yes.
compared to us, right?
Yes.
Even the most advanced ones today, I mean, they're still, they're dumb compared to us.
Yes.
Um, we had to learn how to conform to them.
Mm.
The creation of computer code language in the first place was because computers were so stupid that they couldn't understand our language.
Mm-hmm.
We had to invent a language that a computer could understand, and we had to learn that language so we could talk to the computer,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's played out, basically over 70, 80 years of technology. What's interesting about what's happening with ChatGPT and all these other AI technologies now,
Mm-hmm.
is that they can understand us.
Yes.
So instead of us having to conform to the technology, now the technology can conform to us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly the experience you had. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have this conversation and
Mm-hmm.
learn about my health. Because now you can be you, and the technology can comprehend that. And that part of it is only going to get more and more pronounced over these number of years. All these things that you might think about like, how do I have to like figure out a technology to be able to use it, is going to go away. The
Yes.
technology is all going to be able to understand us. Even if something as simple as a microwave oven. Like, right now, I have, I don't know, a piece of steak in the microwave that I want
Sure.
that was in the freezer that I want to thaw. I got to go to the microwave and think about like, okay, like what do I do? What buttons do I push? How much time? How much
Yes.
power? Whatever. As AI flows into everything, I'm going to be able to just go to the microwave oven and say, I've got the steak. It's, I need it to just to defrost it.
Yes.
Do what you have to do. Put it in, and it should do it. Right.
So,
That's what I mean by technology conforming to us.
so what do you say, Kevin, to those that are saying then that, or those that would say to you, yeah, but then Kevin, technology is going to make us more dumb because then there's no thinking about what I literally got to just move the steak from one spot to the other. And I don't got to think about it. What's your response to that?
Well, I mean, yeah, we don't have to think. I mean, okay, so I don't have to think about like how long to put the meat in the microwave.
Yeah.
To me, that frees me from having to think about that, so I can deal with other things that are more important. And so I think that's sort of the general premise here, is that, I mean, look, we've had Google for
25
10
years.
years or
Yeah.
whatever it's been, 25 years. And
Yeah.
uh, and it hasn't made us dumber, because instead of having to remember who starred in that movie that we saw 5 years
Yes.
ago, we can just Google it. I
Yes.
mean, we're not dumber. We can just find the answer now easily, instead of having to
Well,
like
and
not know it.
that's my saying argument with teachers that are saying, well, no, you guys can't use ChatGPT. I told my kids to become experts in it. I said, if a teacher says don't use it, tell them to call me.
That's the right advice.
I said, if they say you can't use it, then tell them to call me, because I'm going to tell them to use it even more. Because if you're not going to use it, it's like saying to a kid, well, you shouldn't use a calculator. You should use the syllabus, or go use those marbles over there and count things. Right. So I think that, Kevin, to me, the difference, I love this conversation, by the way, because you're a tech writer and I'm a tech nerd. To me, the difference with AI in 2023 is that, unlike the iPhone, unlike the desktop computer, unlike the other, you know, except for the internet, we were able to see all those revolutions. Oh, what's Kevin holding? Oh, it's an iPhone. Oh, what's Keith? Oh, that's a desktop computer. So we saw those physical manifestations of society changing in front of us. With AI, you don't see it. It's creeping into every product we touch. And before you know it, you wake up and everything has an AI in it, or part of it, or running it. And I think that's going to be the difference that a lot of people just aren't perhaps paying attention to. It's like we're in a renaissance period right now. We're going to wake up going, wow, gee, actually we're living in a simulation. Like, what's real? And I'm not trying to get all matrix on us, but it starts to, you can see how you can go down those paths as a nonfiction writer. You really can. It's hard. You can.
Yeah, no, it's true. But I have a couple of quick reactions to that. First of all, AI has been creeping into everything for 20 years.
Yes.
And so there does seem to be this demarcation moment when ChatGPT
Yes.
came out, because it kind of made us all go, oh my God. But that was actually the culmination of
100%.
Of decades of work on AI. And, I mean, this is why, the captain in your plane that you're flying in could fall asleep, and it's
Yes.
get going because AI is driving it. It's that. So it's been around for a while. But the other thing is, I've been around long enough now that the first book I ever wrote was this book called Mega Media Shakeout.
Yeah.
And it came out in April of 1995.
Okay.
And it was based on reporting I'd been doing for several years as a writer for USA Today. And I had gotten kind of caught onto this whole, at that time, information superhighway
Yeah.
stuff that was
Yes.
being
Yes.
taught in interactive television, and especially this idea that media was going to go digital, which was a new thought in the early 90s, this
Right.
idea that media was going to become a digital thing. So I wrote this book that was basically based on what happens when media goes digital, like and how is it going to affect these different industry sectors and our lives and all that. And so it came out in April 1995, and that summer was when Netscape went public, and it was that kind of blow your mind moment for this new thing called the internet. The dot-com era was born.
Yes. Yes. I remember.
And because of that book, I got thrown into the middle of it, because it was really like the first book out about this idea of digital media. And I got hauled into boardrooms and in front of 5,000 people conventions to speak. And by the way, I was the worst speaker in the world at that particular time in my life. I didn't know what I was doing, but everybody was in that. What's happening now reminds me so much of what happened then.
Yes.
Because people didn't know how this was going to affect their companies or their businesses or their lives. People couldn't quite get their heads around it. And the reason I was getting hauled into these things was because they were grasping at anything that could possibly tell them something about
Yes.
this. And so, I mean, all these years later, what's happening now with generative AI is a bigger deal than what happened with the internet then. But just because it's multiplied over all these years, and it's definitely an echo of that time and place and how things happened then. So we're going to, just like that happened. I mean, that the dot-com era launched 5 years of craziness.
Yes.
That ended up crashing, and then a few years later, the Googles and Facebooks and all of those companies were founded that created like this next generation of real stuff that has really made a difference in our lives. And I would not be surprised if that's what we ended up seeing here. A few years of like craziness and all the, hundreds and hundreds of companies being created that trying to figure out what to do with this stuff. And,
yes.
Everybody getting confused and grasping at any answers. And it's going to have some kind of come to mama moment.
Yes.
When all the crazy stuff is going to go away, and then at that point, the real stuff that's going to really change our lives and change the world is going to emerge. I'm sure it'll happen faster than it did in the dot-com era, because everything seems to happen faster now. But I think give it a few years time for that kind of valley and rise to happen again.
Yeah, I heard Reid Hoffman, famous, LinkedIn investor and founder of LinkedIn, said the exact same thing, right? Which I suspect that we're going to see the same, it's history repeating itself, isn't it, Kev? It's just basically, and I would say some similarities happened as the internet was, launching social media and people started figuring out what that was like, and that whole industry kind of became of its own, right? So that's when I launched my previous internet company, as the internet was kind of growing up and social media was starting to come, and and I made a career over there. But when I look at what's happening around us now, it's eerily similar to me. It really is eerily similar. Yeah.
I forget who it was that famously said the history rarely repeats, but it always rhymes.
Yeah.
I feel like it's happening.
That's it. Hey, it's Keith Bilous here and Kevin Maney live in the lab. We're 56 minutes in. What a great conversation, Kev. We generally like to keep our guests for an hour. I don't know if you have a hard stop at 60 minutes, but you do. Excellent. So I want to take one quick minute then. Pitch music, man. What kind of tunes do you play? What's the band all about? And give us a minute on that.
Sure. I have for ages. I love to write music. I've written a lot of music, and so to me, that's the part that I really love. Like the performing and the expression of it is a way to get that out. But yeah, I mean, I write a lot of stuff that probably sounds like things I grew up on in the 70s and
Yeah.
80s,
Who's your influence?
and
Who's your musical influence? Who name one?
everything from the Clash to the Beatles to Springsteen, Tom Petty,
All right,
all of these.
nice. Okay, so producer Roland, we got to get Kevin back on to do a show purely on music. I'll pull the old turntable out. Kevin will bring his guitar in, and we'll talk tunes.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
I
that.
have a band here in New York called Total Blam Blam
Yeah,
that plays around town, and when I can, I go into a recording studio and record stuff. So it's really something. It's my hobby, to go back to our earlier conversation.
it's your hobby. It's your hobby. Kevin Maney talking us out over some Theory of a Dead Man. Kevin, it's been an absolute pleasure having you in the lab today. I got to be honest with you. I probably could have talked for another hour with you, but I need to be respectful of your time. I think I could have covered so much more. You got plenty to talk about, but I just ran out of time. So I want to be grateful and thank you for joining us today in the lab. Any closing comments or things you want to say before we say goodbye? Anything you want to plug? Books, anything you're writing, music?
Yeah.
Go ahead and take a time to plug it right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say, we didn't talk at all about, but like, the most successful book I've ever been a part of has been this one called Play Bigger.
Yeah.
Which created this concept called category design, which has turned into a strategic consulting business that helps startups with their business strategies based on what we wrote in the book. So, yeah, we didn't talk about that at all, but that's like a big part of my life these days is working with startups on their strategy. So
well, let's bring that back then. So we'll bring Kevin back for show number 2. Maybe he'll be our second show guest, so we can talk about the book play, and how he's helping startups today. Maybe he can help Keith today. But Kevin, I don't want to keep you from your next meeting, so I want to thank you for jumping in. And I will. I'm going to close off the show. If you can stick around for one quick second, everybody, it's Keith Bilous here, Kevin Maney. We are live in the lab, live in the Business Athlete Performance Lab, and we're signing out for today. Thanks, Kevin.
Keith, it was a blast. I really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Thank you.